Today is June 27th, 2025, and you're listening to Space News First Up.
Discover your next mission in the space industry with the Space News Job Exchange. Visit spacenews.com/jobs to find top aerospace roles and connect with leading employers. And for employers, use discount code JOBEX for 15% off your next purchase.
Here are today's top headlines in space. A budget reconciliation bill in the Senate could boost Space Force spending to nearly $40 billion in 2026. The Space Force is pausing the procurement of the next set of low Earth orbit communications satellites as it studies whether to turn to SpaceX. Two Chinese astronauts performed a spacewalk outside the Tiangong space station Thursday. And an agreement between the governments of Sweden and the United States brings Firefly Aerospace one step closer to launching from a Swedish spaceport.
First Up is produced by Space News, the industry standard for professional space journalism. Visit spacenews.com for breaking news, policy updates, and original analysis.
We begin today with news that a budget reconciliation bill in the Senate could boost Space Force spending to nearly $40 billion in 2026. The unprecedented budget structure, which defense officials describe as one budget, two bills, would give the Space Force $26.1 billion in traditional discretionary funding while adding another $13.8 billion through the sweeping reconciliation package. The reconciliation bill also includes $25 billion for Golden Dome. The total $39.9 billion request would represent the most dramatic year-over-year increase for the military's newest service branch. However, the Pentagon said it has no backup plan for increasing defense spending if the bill fails. The Space Force is pausing the procurement of the next set of low Earth orbit communications satellites as it studies whether to turn to SpaceX. The Trump administration's proposed 2026 budget would suspend procurement of data transport satellites for the Proliferated Warfighter Space Architecture, PWSA. The Space Development Agency had planned to procure up to 140 Tranche 3 satellites for that system in 2026 for launch in 2028. The Space Force is instead considering using SpaceX's Starship program, a militarized version of the company's commercial Starlink broadband satellites. Under that plan, the Tranche 3 satellites would be replaced with 480 Starship satellites being procured for the Milnet program. That approach has raised concerns in industry about the health of satellite manufacturers and supply chains who built up their capabilities to support a steady stream of procurements for the PWSA constellations. Two Chinese astronauts performed a spacewalk outside the Tiangong space station Thursday. Chen Zhongrui and Chen Dong spent nearly 6.5 hours outside the station on a spacewalk that concluded at 9:29 a.m. Eastern. The two installed debris shields on the exterior of the station and performed inspections of equipment. This was the second spacewalk for the two astronauts since they arrived at the station 2 months ago on the Shenzhou 20 spacecraft. The mission's third astronaut, Wang Jie, supported the spacewalk from inside the station. An agreement between the governments of Sweden and the United States brings Firefly Aerospace one step closer to launching from a Swedish spaceport. The countries signed a Technology Safeguards Agreement, TSA, last week to allow the export of commercial launch vehicles to Sweden for launches there. The TSA is needed for Firefly to launch its Alpha rocket from Sweden's Esrange Space Center under a deal with the Swedish Space Corporation announced a year ago. The first launches of Alpha from Esrange could take place as soon as late 2026.
Share your company's news with the entire space industry through Stellar Dispatch, the press release service from Space News. Learn more and use discount code SD2106 for 15% off when you submit yours at spacenews.com/stellardispatch.
In other news, Rocket Lab launched 4 satellites for HawkEye 360 Thursday in the first of back-to-back launches. An Electron rocket lifted off from the company's Launch Complex 1 in New Zealand at 1:28 p.m. Eastern, deploying its payload nearly an hour later. The rocket carried 3 Cluster 12 satellites. HawkEye 360 will use for radio frequency intelligence as well as a tech demo satellite, Kestrel 0A. Rocket Lab said, after the launch, it had rescheduled another Electron launch for a confidential customer, postponed from last week to early Saturday. The two launches within 48 hours would be the shortest turnaround between Electron missions from Launch Complex 1. The New York Times reports that the president of Mexico is threatening to sue SpaceX regarding Starship debris that landed in the country. Claudia Sheinbaum said at a press conference this week that the government was considering legal action after incidents like last week's static fire test explosion that rained debris on Mexican territory across the Rio Grande. SpaceX said any debris posed no chemical, biological, or toxicological risks, and claimed that its efforts to recover debris were hindered by unauthorized parties. SpaceX added it is willing to offer resources and assistance to Mexican authorities for debris cleanup. Pyongyang Daily reports that Korean conglomerate LG Group is looking to get into the space industry. Company executives met with officials from South Korea's space agency, KASA, on Friday to discuss cooperation on space activities. That included unspecified support for upcoming launches of South Korea's Naro rocket and work with a Korean startup on a small lunar rover. The Economic Times of India reports that a former head of the Indian space agency ISRO is advising a launch startup in the country. Skyroot Aerospace said it named former ISRO chairman S. Somanath as its honorary chief technical advisor. He will provide technical support as the company works on its Vikram small launch vehicle. Skyroot separately announced Thursday a memorandum of understanding with Axiom Space to examine how Skyroot could assist Axiom's commercial space station and other plans.